Okay, so I'm Tom Clavel, Director of Product Marketing here at ExtraHop, and I'm going to show you how ExtraHop RevealX allows you to detect, respond, and investigate, and even defend against supply chain attacks within your organization. So let's talk a little bit about supply chain and how tricky they are. I want to state a basic definition of software supply chain attacks, which is that, and that will make it easy to understand what the problem is. What makes software supply chain attacks different is that they exploit the privileged relationship that you have within your ecosystem, with your suppliers, your vendors, any types of software and devices that you have running on your network. And so those attacks, they compromise your software vendors and your service providers, and they use that access, that privileged access, to break into your system. So a supply chain attack is really a type of cyber attack in which the attacker gains the access to your network by first compromising a third-party software or device or service providers. And, and they use privilege but legitimate access to your system rather than attacking your network directly. So, so software providers require privileged access to your business assets and process in order for their software to work. Think about Salesforce, for instance, having a full list of your clients, or think about how the HR system might be connected to your network, but you don't always check what access other people might have to your HR system. So the list is extremely complex, extremely long about the number of suppliers and software and devices that are running on the network. It's so complex that it's very hard for you to keep an eye on what's going on there. And what further complicates this is that you don't have access to the codes of that software or those devices. You don't know what's happening on those devices. You don't have any control, any visibility into your vendor's devices or applications. And that makes it extremely difficult to stop software supply chain attacks. So the question, given that, the question is, has an attacker entered your network already? And most importantly, how would you know if somebody is already in your network if you don't have access to the code, to what's going on in those devices or third-party applications? And that is the crux of the challenge that happens with supply chain attacks. So let's look into how supply chain attacks are accelerating. First of all, they're not new. They've been existing for a long time. We've seen a lot of attacks like this. And so attackers that get into the supply chain are prioritizing stealth. They're looking for ways to evade existing security tools, and they've got plenty of options. So here we have two examples. We have EDR, for instance, and SIEM. And EDR and SIEM are great legitimate security tools, but they have their own flaws as well. SIEM, for instance, often requires a lot of manual and labor-intensive work to browse and to comb through the system. EDR, for instance, requires to have an agent to be deployed on a particular device. And that means that the agent also has to be compatible with the OS, and those devices have to be able to take in the agents. So in what we see with our customers is that only 30 to 60% of endpoint devices are covered by EDR. And that's the issue with software supply chain, because very often in the case of IoT devices, for instance, those devices do not take an EDR. They cannot be managed by EDR. And so they're flying under the radar, but they yet granting access to your network. And so what we do at ExtraHop is that we comb through the network. So any device that's connected to the network is going to ingest data and produce data onto that network. So if you secure the network, you effectively secure those devices. And so And so even if you don't know what's happening with a particular device, you can control access to that device by controlling the traffic on the network. And that is very important because companies are investing in initial intrusion, and they're typically under-investing in post-compromise detection tactics where they have the most advantage, especially with software supply chain attacks. So what we do is we provide detection and response for the full attack chain. So we can detect attack post-compromise, which is extremely critical to stop advanced threats. And we also excel at detecting, at prevention and signature detection with next-gen or next-gen IDS capabilities. So what we do is we combine the capabilities of next-generation IDS, NDR, forensics capabilities, and performance monitoring to harness the full potential of network intelligence. And so we break down the silos within your security stack, and we break down and we can completely dismantle the attack chain of a supply chain attack, because if you cannot catch an attacker when the attack is happening before the compromise, once the attacker is inside the network, you can actually find that attacker, because that attacker has to effect a series of actions, and every action has to stay under the radar. And so the odds are playing in your favor. I'm going to cover that in just a minute in the next slide. So, but when you have coverage across the core, the cloud, and the edge, and when you have coverage on the intrusion level, post-compromise, and also on the outcome, you have complete visibility and complete security of your network. So let's talk a little bit about this and how it works with one example. This is a real attack, and this is a real customer that was attacked by the dark side ransomware using software supply chain, and so the attack here was thwarted before any encryption happened. The opening act here was an intrusion attack with a compromised VDI session. And so the attackers were able to access the user's credentials through a suspected password leak. That's a typical ways to do software supply chain attack. The first thing that we alerted the customers on was the interactive traffic. On the interactive traffic was an external endpoint. And so the attacker was setting up a reverse tunnel with a command and control base. And this was weird for this type of user, but more so, it was communicating via SSH and with an endpoint out on the internet. And it communicated with an endpoint that it never spoke to before. So that was our first red flag. As you can see, we've issued a series of red flags. And so about a day later, that same user session was even enumerating the files and moving them on the VDI profile. Again, it's not something this user has ever done before, and it's not something they're supposed to be doing. So you can notice here how the bulk of the interaction here is actually internal to the network. Reading and copying the files from a storage cluster to a user machine would never hit the perimeter protection. The initial intrusion vector was accomplished here without a direct attack against the company. It's the external traffic that was the only perimeter indicator of anything in progress. So for this customer, we were able to alert and destroy the VDI profile before any data encryption was executed. But without looking internally, that customer would have been part of the next news cycle. They would have been part of the ransomware attack. And so this really gives you the example of how having post-compromise indicators surveying what happens on the network is critical, especially for supply chain attacks. So RevealX is the only cloud-native SaaS-based NDR platform that is built for the demanding needs of the enterprise. It is cloud-delivered, which means that it works across multiple cloud workloads. including SaaS and also such as Microsoft 365. And we provide cloud-based AI that delivers insights at scale. So the deployment model is very flexible, and it can adjust to your enterprise, to your needs, without while correlating attack insight and across the entire the correlating attack insights across the entire environment. So RevealX provides the complete visibility of attacks in motion, even when the malicious behavior is hidden in encrypted traffic. It provides a powerful AI ML detection capability with full spectrum visibility, over 1 million of predictive models. And so that you can find the known, but also the unknown attacks with the highest level of fidelity. So what we do here is we deliver the information intuitively in our web UI so that you can understand what's happening across every tier of the environment, from users to web to database to storage to network. And so from the cloud to the data center to the remote site. So when you have that level of visibility, how can you secure your workloads? How can you protect against the cloud, against the software supply chain attacks? That's the question. The question is, how would you know? Well, so let's revisit that question. If you have visibility inside your network, how would you know? Well, you don't know because you don't have visibility inside the code, inside the software, but you have visibility inside the network with RevealX. And so the way that you would know is because RevealX would actually tell you what's happening on the network. Thank you very much.